Okay, I think we're live here. Can somebody tell me if we are live? By the way, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have never done a live chat. I'm not even sure if anyone can hear me. I don't even know if anyone's here. Oh, one viewer. I see one viewer. For those of you watching a repeat of this after the recording is over, you might want to skip ahead a few minutes because, like I said, I have no clue what I'm doing. Viewers are just coming in. There's 4 viewers right now. Can someone put something in the chat just so I can make sure this works? Let me put a few test messages in the chat. Test, test. This is all very exciting. Not seeing any chat messages. Are there, it looks like there's 4 viewers so far. Can someone type something in the chat if you can hear me? Might have to post to the actual event, the Patreon chat here, or the Patreon thread to see if anyone can see this. Bear with me, folks. Check 2. Well, to narrate my exploration here. Oh, Sam says, we can hear you, chat is live, maybe refresh your view. Thanks, Sam. Weird, I don't have a live chat here. I'm not sure. I don't think I can refresh. No. There's no refresh button on my screen, like on my broadcast screen. And here, I'll show you. Whoa, infinite screens. That might crash. Let's not do that. Oh, this is annoying, guys. I can't see the chat. There's no, all I see in the chat is my message that I sent at well, the top of the hour, 6 o'clock for me. Okay. I have no idea how to fix this chat problem. I'm refreshing the Patreon page, like where the live chat is embedded on Patreon. If anyone knows how to fix this, it'd be awesome if you posted there. I'm refreshing this page here. Sam says, maybe open YouTube in a separate window. Your message will be oh, that's a good idea. That's a very good idea. Okay, let's do that. Okay. I think it's time I made it. That's my own video. Oh, wait. Let's see. Oh, okay. Now I can see the chat. Sam, genius. Thank you, Sam Reeves. Okay, so now I am on YouTube, and I can go test, test. Can you guys see my test, test message? And can you still hear me? Sam, I see your message here. Glad to be of service. Can you see my, okay, you guys, hey, Didon's here. How you doing, Didon? Okay. Well, guys, there's 7 of us here. Silver. Hi, Silver. Hi, Ixie92. All right. So let's actually get going now. So I just want to say, guys, this is the 100 Patreon live chat reward. If you're watching this and you're a obviously, if you're watching this, you are a Patreon, either past or future. I just want to say thank you so much for your support. It's been really cool well, more than cool. It's been absolutely humbling to see support coming in since I launched Patreon, and it's a pleasure to, be someone who can hopefully help other people with their art learning. I know that I've had a lot of teachers kind of come and go throughout my own learning, and I remember every single one of them, and I always I just feel like it's important for me to say thank you before we get going. Anyway, so the way I want to operate here is, this is not a formal lecture. I mean, I can talk if no one's asking questions, I can just talk about random stuff. But I just wanted to get to questions. It can be anything from art fundamentals to life as a freelance artist, commercial artist, anything that's on your mind. Developing skills, questions about values and light and color, whatever it is. And I will do demos if it relates to the question. I will be happy to just sketch something out, or maybe I'll be bringing in photographs, or maybe I'll be bringing in my old paintings. I brought this painting in that you guys see on the screen right now because it happens to be the very first green monster painting that I ever did. So I thought that was just relevant to just have something on the screen. So I just picked that one. And no one has asked a question yet. So I'll just start talking about something. The thing that I always, I bring this painting up a lot in my classes. Oh, Sam asked a question. And I'll get to, the questions will take priority. So I'm going to just stop what I was talking about and get to Sam's question. So Sam says, how do you feel about fan art? Should we create YouTube videos demoing fan art? Well, I guess I feel fine about it. I have a video where I paint Batman 4 times, as I'm sure you know. I guess that's obviously fan art, right? I don't, when it comes to like demoing fan art on YouTube and stuff, yeah, I'd say go for it. As long as if you're bringing something, like when I painted those Batman characters, obviously the video was about style. My video about when I painted Batman was about style. So I brought something to it that I could teach. I don't know if if you guys are thinking about making videos, sometimes you can make videos where you don't teach, you're just painting, and that's cool too. Like, people can still learn from that. It's still educational. But yeah, I think that using fan art is good for, like, I mean, I hate to sound shallow, but it's good for clicks too, because if people see Batman on a screen, they might click on it more than if they see, like, this green monster. Not that I do that on my channel. When I did that Batman, just to let you guys in behind the curtain a little bit as to like what goes on when I make a YouTube video, like 99% of the time, I don't make, like, let's call it clickbaity. I don't make clickbaity titles or thumbnails. Like, I try and be very honest with what it is I'm doing, and I try and tailor my YouTube videos to what I want to teach, right? Like, ambient occlusion is not some kind of like incredibly hot topic, but it's something I think is important. But with that Batman video, it was, I mean, I wanted to teach things about style, and I had been wanting to make a video about style. But when it came to choosing the subject, I have to admit, I chose Batman just to have a little personal experiment to see if having Batman on the cover would generate more traffic. And it actually did. It, not like multitudes more, but it is one of my higher viewed videos. And it was just a personal experiment. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to start doing that over and over. I think it's kind of cheap when artists do that. And I quickly become disinterested in people who like just post like salacious thumbnails and stuff. But at least with the Batman video, it's still an honest thumbnail. Those are my paintings, and I demo each one, so it was still honest enough. But yeah, the fan art, go back to the question, fan art's cool. Albert's here. Hi, Albert. Thanks for joining. We have 10 viewers. This is cool, guys. Yeah, so anyway, until another question comes in, I'll just talk about this image here. I use this as a demo for ambient light a lot in my classes, and you guys hopefully have seen my latest video that came out on Monday about ambient occlusion and ambient light. Now, I have not yet made a follow-up video where I talk about how ambient light affects color, but just to talk about that a little bit, and I'll, this will be, I'm sure I'll be covering a lot of these same pointers in my upcoming video about this, but obviously this will be just off the cuff, just me talking here. Let's first look at ambient occlusion here, and then we'll talk about ambient light in general. And by the way, just for new viewers, the questions trump everything. This is a Q&A at heart. So if you guys have questions, throw them in the chat. And Albert says several questions. Okay, yeah, well, we have a couple hours, Albert, so you can space them out. Vrumian, hi, Vrumian. Vrumian says, what non-art thing that I've learned over the years has helped you the most in art? That's a very good question. I would say that a non-art thing that has helped me in art, although this is, I mean, you can kind of relate this to art, but the answer to that is being very clear in the idea that you're expressing. And I learned this through, I credit mostly reading and writing. I'm not a professional writer, but I do read a lot and I do write a fair bit. I don't write like every day like a professional would, but I do a bit of writing. And I'm actually working on some blog post writing now that I have not yet published. But anyway, when you read good writers and when you try and write your own work, one of the things you grapple with, or at least one of the things I grapple with, and I think I'm not alone here, is like the communication of an idea. And so like here's where I'll do a quick little diagram. This is not going to be like a painting. This is just going to be a visual indication of what I'm talking about. So let's say like I want to tell the viewer about a box, and I want to do it. This is the message I'm trying to express to the viewer is this perfectly nicely shaped box, right? Well, when I'm writing about this box here, my first effort, like my first few sentences, it might describe the box, but the box kind of looks like this. It's not a very good, the fidelity to my message is low. It's not a very good communication of my message. It's kind of there, like this is box-like, but I don't want the viewer to see this. I want the viewer to see this, right? So what I've learned about communication is it needs constant revision. And unless you're some kind of savant in the field of speaking or writing or painting, chances are what you're going to paint on the canvas, I'll stick to painting, what you're going to paint on the canvas is not, like with your first try, is not going to be exactly what you want to communicate. Chances are your first painting is going to be like this, kind of wobbly, kind of off message, not quite there. It'll, somewhat will be there. But then what you want to do is you want to like look at it, like go to bed that night, get up the next morning, look at your painting with fresh eyes and see what needs to be done to convert that into that. And that's like, honestly, most of my professional, or no, let me back up a second. Most of what I think will turn a amateur artist into a professional, and I'm sure this goes for like writing too, or any art discipline, acting maybe, is that level of refinement. The ability to take an unsculpted message, an unrefined message, and turn it into something like undeniably present. Like someone can look at this box here and say, well, is it a blob or is it a box? Which one is it? That's unclear. They don't know, right? But when someone looks at this, they say it's a box, or I should say square. Sorry, it's a square. This is a blob. This is a square. And you can see how they're both iterations of the same thing. But having a clear message is one of the main things that I've learned outside of painting that I've brought into painting. And again, I learned it through mostly reading, just like reading good writers. And it can be fiction, nonfiction. Reading's probably the best thing I do outside of, like for myself, outside of painting. Sam follows up. Do I ever feel guilty for giving time to other artistic outlets than painting? Oh man. Yeah. Let me get to that, Sam. That's a good question. And if so, how do I resolve that? So first of all, let me just quickly back up and say, for those, watching, listening, like I said a few minutes ago, this is mostly a Q&A, which mostly involves talking. So I hope you guys will forgive me if I'm not doing much painting in these 2 hours. Like I might do these silly little demonstrations, like visual things like this. And, eventually I might get back into this, but I'm only going to do painting. So, insofar as I need to. This is more about like us discussing things and having a live chat together. So So Sam asked a question in two parts. Let me go back here just for fun. So do I ever feel guilty for giving time to other artistic outlets? That is a huge yes. And it's actually, it's amazing that you asked that, Sam, because I've tried to express that thought to my core group of friends and my wife also. Like, my wife is not an artist, and I mean, she's creative in her own right, but she's not an artist. She's a businesswoman, and I mean, our marriage works for many reasons, but we don't really connect on art because she just doesn't pursue that, whereas I do. And one of the things I tell my wife, like, as I try and, like, I'm trying to write more, like I said, I'm trying to write blog posts, I'm trying to write a children's book or a few children's books I have, like, drafting. And I feel immense guilt when I'm writing, because, and I think I think why I feel it is because I'm not painting. Like, when I'm like, if I'm sitting at a Starbucks writing, or I'm sitting in a park writing, or wherever I'm writing, because I try and write away from my painting desk, because I know that if I'm at my painting desk, I'll just start painting, or I'll start working on, like, client jobs that need to be done. So when I tear myself away from my desk and I go write, I feel horribly guilty, because I think the feeling that I have is that, like, I ask myself, like, why am I writing? Well, I'm writing because it's a creative outlet and I feel good when I write. Well, then my brain says, well, you already have a creative outlet and it's painting. And guess what, buddy? You're a professional painter. You know how to paint. So why not just go home and paint and do the thing that you're good at, and not sit here and do the thing that you're not good at, which is writing? So I feel that guilt. So Sam asks, a follow up to that is, how do I resolve that? Sam, I don't know. I'm still working on that. I don't know how to resolve it. I have many of you guys know, because it's a Patreon tier reward, that I have written a 100-page book on creativity. That book kind of circumvented the guilt problem, because I was writing about the thing I knew about. Like, I know about painting and what it takes, like how it feels to be a creative person struggling, and battles and victories. I know what that feels like because I've been through it. I've also been teaching for 10 years. So when I was writing that book, it still took me a year to write those 100 pages, but I didn't feel guilty writing it, because I knew that I had something to say, and I knew that, hello, Lex. Lex made it. Nice to see you here. I knew that when I was writing that it was valid somehow. Just like when I paint, I know that, like, I know what it's like to search for a painting. So I know that what I'm doing is probably going to, like, bear fruit. Even if the painting doesn't work, I know that it'll be worthwhile, because it'll probably lead to something that does work. That's a big part of my process. But when I'm writing fiction, which I've tried to do many times over the years, tried to write short stories and stuff. When I'm writing that stuff, like, I can't seem to successfully, I haven't found the way to surmount that yet. So in that sense, I'm like so many other creative people, where I have all these inner battles that I have to fight to win. And honestly, when it comes to writing, I have not produced what I, would have expected myself to by now. So I'm still working on that one. With painting, let me just get to the chat again, because people are talking. Didon says, Marco, can you tell us about your beginnings, why you wanted to do art and make it a career, and where did I go to school? Yes, Didon, I will talk about that. Let me just finish up this thought. So then Albert says, color and shape is a difficult thing for me to grab. I have seen your plein airs and digital as well, but I think way too much. How to even approach color? Okay, so let me usually things tend to just disintegrate when I start to add in color. I can't seem to get control over the painting or marker sketches, and they regularly just get loose shape. Okay, Albert, I can quickly demonstrate something that might help you. And this is something that I've been tooling around with in general. I'm not saying you should paint this way, but as an exercise, I do think maybe you should try this as an exercise. So, and I'm just going to keep it simple. I am going to, this is the ground. Here's a ground plane that I've just drawn. And on that ground plane, I'm going to put a sphere. And I'm going to block it out with values first. Okay, so I'm going to pretend like it's lit by the sun, just like I did in that ambient occlusion video. And by the way, Didon, I will get back to your message right after this. Yours will be the next one I answer. Yeah, I should also say, guys, as we're talking here and more people join, I very well may fall behind the chat. So feel free to give me a nudge if I'm talking too much about one particular thing. Just give me a little nudge in the comments. Okay, so we've got our sphere painted, and I've got a basic idea of the lighting, right? So now what I want to do is, Albert's question is about adding color and getting lost. The reason people get lost with color is because you sacrifice your values. That's the mistake people make. Because what I've got here, even though it's rough, it's a very nicely blocked out bit of painting. There is average light here. This is average light. You guys know average light from my 10 minutes to better painting video, episode 6. So that's average light. This is halftone, which was also in episode 6. This is average shadow. And I've done a little bit of thing where I've made the cast shadow a bit of a lighter value because, as you know, from ambient light, that light from the environment's going to come down, right? And also maybe there's a bit of reflected light up here too, indirect light bouncing up like this. But I've just worked in values right now. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. I'm going to suggest now that you start adding color. But before you do that, make a black and white node up here, a black and white adjustment layer. You can just leave the defaults as is. Make a new layer on top of your sphere and start painting color in. And basically, I'm just going to, you won't be able to see it because when I paint color, the black and white layer is going to render everything black and white, right? But when I paint color, I am going to ignore the fact that I can't see it. And all I'm going to do is try and match my values. And I'm also going to get a little crazy with the color as well. Meaning, when I say crazy, meaning I'm going to choose greens and purples and things. Now, see that when I paint that purple, see that I just did that brushstroke? That doesn't match my value. So I'm going to move the purple to match the value. That's still too light. Let's go down darker. There we go. This matches the value. And I'm just going to block in my shadows now with color. You guys can see the color picker up here, right? You see which color I'm using. I don't even care which color I'm using, as long as that value is matched. The point I'm trying to make here, as we'll see, is that the color actually doesn't matter as long as the value is good. And painting in black and white like this with a black and white filter will actually be a very good way of showing us that. And I don't know, this might not work. I've obviously rehearsed this, but I have done it in a class before and it worked out fine. So let's see. I'm going to paint the ground plane here, get my value right. This will also get you, one of the things that is a skill you develop over time, Albert, and anyone else interested in color, is knowing where your values are when you're painting certain colors. Like, this is almost unteachable, but when I'm moving around the color picker, I know from experience and by eye when I'm seeing colors on the canvas, I kind of know where they are in value. And that's just something that comes with experience. I try my best to make up ways of teaching it, but honestly, it comes with experience, like converting color into value just in your own mind. What I'm doing is I'm converting color into value with Photoshop right now. And you will see in a second, I will turn off that black and white layer. Let's actually do it now. So look at the sphere here. The colors are ridiculous. And actually, let me just keep painting because I haven't filled up all my spaces yet. Let me keep painting into the light. Highlight in there. And now that I turn this off, you can see the colors are ridiculous, but it still works. It still has form, right? And now what I can do is to go, like, by the way, I can turn off, you know, I can, let me do something here. Let me just duplicate the sphere and just move it over here just for reference. And this is a good way of just kind of proving to yourself, Albert, and again, you should do this yourself. Don't just watch me do it. Do this on your own Photoshop because it will show you how color really doesn't matter. And I think a lot of artists, when they start painting color, like I said, the first thing they do is they sacrifice these clear values. So you can see in my colors, even though the colors, like I said, are crazy and nonsensical, they keep the values. And it's the values that drive this. Now, from here, you can start working into this. And I'll say, I can, you know, obviously I can change my color. And now that I have a color lay-in, as ridiculous as it is, I can start adjusting those colors and making them more like if this were supposed to be a, you know, a red ball, I don't know, you can paint in the color that actually should be there. Hello, Julia. Julia's here. Nice to see you, Julia. Thank you for joining. All right, so let me go back to, I promised Didon I would answer his message next. It's all about, he says, Marco, can you tell us about your beginnings, why you wanted to do art and make it a career, and where did I go to art school? So, oh, and how did I start my career after that? So I actually did not go to art school. I studied film in a university in Toronto called Ryerson University. It was it still is a nice film school. It's good. It has a good reputation, and the teachers were good. And I had a fun time in that program. I learned a lot about writing, like screenplay writing and storytelling, like, you know, something like this basic as like the 3-act structure that I didn't really know about before that. I learned about that. I learned about different kinds of structures of film. And I learned, you know, how to work on film projects, like shooting stuff. And so I found art right around then. It's funny because I wanted to go to animation school because I was interested in drawing and painting at the time, and I was 19 years old at this time. I couldn't draw. Like I wasn't born with a drawing talent like a lot of people are, which I'm thankful for now for reasons you probably know if you've read Creativity in the Campfire, but I never had a drawing talent. So I got rejected from 2 different animation schools. I applied to Sheridan and OCAD, and I got rejected from both. Actually, I didn't even submit my OCAD application because I don't know, I was lazy or something. I wanted to go to Sheridan, didn't get in though. So I went to film school. I did get into film school because I had some 3D I had some 3D work. Like I worked in 3D graphics programs, and I guess that impressed them enough to let me into film school. And one of the serendipitous things was right across from that film school was a teacher named Nick Kalislian, who taught life drawing at the time. I'll put his name in the chat. You can check out his work. His name is Nick Kalislian. He had a life drawing studio, and I took my very first life drawing class at age 19, and I instantly fell in love with drawing. And Nick was I was fortunate. Nick was an amazing teacher, and he taught me, or the first thing Nick taught me was that you can learn how to be an artist. Like you can learn how to draw. And I didn't know that. I thought you had to be born with talent. And I think a lot of people think that, but I learned from nothing. I had no drawing experience. I tried to draw as a kid, but they were not good. And no one ever thought that I would ever be an artist, but I learned some life drawing. And then from there, because I started learning life drawing, like figure drawing, I'm like, well, Nick was also an animator, by the way. So Nick taught me, like, I took a character design class with Nick. I took like not a graphic design, but drawing graphically, like drawing appealing characters like Disney stuff, and also drawing classically, like classical life drawing. I took those classes with Nick. They were just like 10-week classes, once a week for 10 weeks. So I studied with Nick for like 20 weeks officially. But through that, I kept going to Nick's open life drawing classes like 3 times a week or something like that. And like, I was dedicated. The days I wasn't life drawing with Nick, I was drawing on my own. And a few years later, I got into painting. I made an animated film like 4 years later. My final film from film school was animated. I was the only one that did an animated film. Like everyone else was live action because it was a live action program. And right around that, when it comes to getting a job, in 2005, I graduated in 2005. And in 2005, there was a job fair, a local studio in Toronto that's now bankrupt. Core Digital Pictures had a job fair, and they were hiring for, they were crewing up for a show. They were hiring everything: animators, designers, layout artists, color key artists, background artists, etc. And I showed up with a sprawling portfolio. My portfolio was completely unfocused. I told this story in a YouTube video, so I won't repeat it. But the story about getting into the industry, I showed up with a portfolio and I got hired. And I was as surprised as anyone. I was as surprised as my parents. My parents had no clue that I was like working on this stuff because, you know, I had moved away from home at that time and they didn't know. So I got hired as a background artist. So it took me, I started in 2000. Like I started drawing in 2000. I got my first professional job in 2005. So it took me 5 years to become professional. And then from there, it's, you know, it's one of those, like, I've never looked back kind of things. That was when I knew that I could be a professional artist, once I got my very first job. Yeah, so, oh, I thought there were more questions. Okay, so I'll keep going on that. Oh, you know what? I'll skip back to this. So at my very first job, I was a color key painter, meaning I did, in fact, on my website, I have a few paintings. I will show you them. If you've been to my website, you've seen these, but I'll just drag my website into view here. My very first job was on this show here called Iggy Arbuckle. And these are the paintings we would do. These are nothing special. In fact, I don't even know why I have them on my website. I should probably take them down, but this is done back in 2005. I did not draw the layouts. The layouts were provided by the layout department. And we just, we painted them. So, but on this show, when I think of this show, what I remember fondly and a lesson that I still apply to my work to this day was the idea that a painting is composed of many abstract shapes. And one of the things that this style kind of did, this style took literally, was the idea of like these connected shapes. Like if you look at this volcano interior thing, you guys see as I'm tracing my mouse over it right now, there's like a big like jigsaw puzzle shape of red there. And like it connects to another bluish kind of shape. Maybe it's more obvious in this volcano. You can see these like pointy shapes. Now the edges are adjusted with texture, and there's texture overlaid on top of them, but you can really see like the DNA of all these shapes left behind. The style of this show was of that nature. It was very like unabashedly shape-based. A little less obvious in this one. And a little less obvious in this one too. In fact, those were two early ones, but you can see it. And if you look at like the silhouettes, like the trees and the moon and the grass, they were all extremely hard edged. So the show was very clear with its graphic shapes, and we achieved a very punchy look. And that honestly revolutionized my art. Even though my painting looks nothing like this now, I use this idea. And if you've seen any of my videos, which of course all of you have because you're on my Patreon, I still use this idea of very clear shape design, or at least I try to. I don't always succeed, but this is actually a good bridge back to this painting. So let me bring this back up again. You see these very clear like triangular shapes of the grass. Well, even though this painting is more painterly, way more painterly, you can still see, like as I trace this shape here, like you can still see that it's a very clear shape. It's like this wedge kind of shape, right? That same shape is echoed over here on the light of this cliff rock face here. It's the same shape. I'll draw them both. It's two shapes that are the same. They're just inversions of each other. That was, I'm totally cognizant of that when I paint. And I think every good painter thinks of this, and I try my best to be a good painter. But when I'm painting, I'm like like when we're 16 years old and our first job, we're like a stock boy. My first job, I was like an inventory person at Canadian Tire, which is like a Home Depot kind of store. I was, I had a scanning gun, and I would take inventory and like stock the shelves where we needed more stock, right? I think of that when I paint, except my inventory I'm doing is I'm a shape inventory person. I have to know what shapes I'm stocking my painting with, and if those shapes, this is not a perfect analogy. This is where my YouTube videos are way better than me talking off the cuff, because I'm getting lost in my own metaphor right now. But I need to know what shapes are on my canvas, how they fit on the shelf, so to speak, where I need more shapes, where I need fewer shapes, if I'm overstocked on some shapes. It's like this workman-like kind of process that I have when I paint. And Didon asked another question. Oh, sorry, Didon. I will get right back to that. And I think that's a very good discipline for anyone to take into account when they're painting. In my episode 6 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting, I outlined those 3 values that you can use in your work. Remember, I pointed them out on this sphere just a moment ago. Average light here, halftone here, average shadow there. Those values make shapes. This is I also talked about this in episode 6, right? they make very clear shapes. The average light shape looks like this. This is all average light, right? And if there's a highlight in there, it'd be another shape. Let me undo those. This shape here is halftone, right? So you're assigning values to shapes. Or you can go the other way. You're assigning shapes to values. This value is average shadow, and it makes a shape, right? And then you can break it down further. Going beyond episode 6 of 10 Minutes of Better Painting, there's a little shape here. I talked about this in the ambient occlusion one. This is a shape of reflected light value. This is also a shape of reflected light value. So you're always cognizant of these shapes that you're painting. And this gets back to Albert's question a few minutes ago about losing, can't remember how he worded it. Let me go back up in the chat. Disintegrate. It's a good word that Albert used. Usually things tend to disintegrate, he says, when I start adding color. Disintegrate's a great word, and the reason why it's disintegrating is because you're losing either your shape or your value, or both at the same time. You're losing one or both, and you can't lose any. You can't afford to lose any of those, because the DNA of a painting is these shapes. Like if I, for example, I'll show you a very common way people lose shapes. This is almost every student I've ever taught has done this, including me when I was more of a beginner. And I still do it from time to time, but I catch myself now often. And that is, though, their halftones will go too dark. So look at this. You have the halftone of the sphere, right? A lot of painters would do this. In effort to make the light look more contrasty and like poppy, they will make their halftone too dark, like this, and it will start being confused with shadow. This is an extremely common mistake. When I do this, what I have just done is I have turned what is a very clear halftone here. I've turned it into something questionable. Is that light or is that shadow now? Which one is it? It's somewhere in between now, and we don't clearly know when I undo all those strokes. Now it's light. Halftones are part of your light, which I talked about again in episode 6. In many ways, episode 6 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting is one of the most important value lessons that I ever was taught, was those 3 values. I learned those 3 values from Morgan Weisling. He actually taught a 5-value system. And for students who have studied with me, like Didon was with me at CGMA, I actually add 2 more values to that list. But and I'll probably make a YouTube video about that later. But 3 values are critical. You can even just use 2, just average light, average shadow. Like just look at comic book art, right? In fact, one of the I'm just browsing my hard drive on my other screen. Just give me a moment. One of the images I did not use in episode 6 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting. I have all these. So here's episode 6. You guys can see all the assets that I make for those videos. This is why they take so long. Let me see if I can find it. The game show almost killed me. That stupid smartphone game show, that was almost the death of me. Oh, this one here. I did not use this because I thought maybe I would get copyrighted for it. This is Mike Mignola drawing Hellboy, right? And comic book artists are fantastic to look at because they're so good with just 2 shapes, light and dark, just average light, average shadow, right? Let me take the color away from this. It's just 2 values, and it's so clear. And you notice that, don't get confused by the little... don't get confused by these little nicks and scratches. Those are still just like, we don't see those. Those are just shadow for all intents and purposes. They're just added for effect. But look at how clear Mignola's shape design is. In fact, Hellboy, and again, I was going to use this in my episode, but decided not to. But Hellboy is great art to look at for shape design and shape study. It's just so good. Like whether or not you want your work to look like Mike Mignola, that's immaterial. It doesn't matter. But look at like this shape, right? This contour. And then look at this one. It's the same. It's like my monster painting, right? It's like my green monster painting I showed you earlier, that shape and this shape. There's like this little mirroring and like rhyming of shape happening. Mignola makes very characteristic shapes that are totally part of his personality. And of course, you and I will be different from this. Like my shapes don't look like Magnola's, but I have the same kind of repertoire that's going through my head, like that stock boy kind of metaphor that I was using earlier. You know, Magnola's doing that. And when you look at comic book art, comic book art that's done in black and white like this, like two values, you can really get a sense for the clarity that you need when you want to be a good painter. And these two values are just average light, average shadow. That's it. And look at how much, the whole piece is there. This painting, this drawing would not benefit from me adding halftones and highlights. It would look different if I did that. I could change the style of it to look more painterly like this, but the information would not change. This painting works just as well as it would if I painted it. All right, so let me go back to Didon's message. Oh, Silver asked one as well. Silver was asking about the color. Are there any tips you could give on traditional art things as well? Yeah, I will bring that up, Silver. Let me just get to Didon's second question. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the chat here. Oh, have you always wanted to be in the entertainment industry, or did you want to be a painter or fine artist at first? I always wanted to be in the entertainment industry. When I first started, like I said, I had started with 3D software, which ironically or incidentally, I'm actually learning again from scratch kind of now, 20 years later. I started doing 3D stuff in 1996. It was right after Toy Story came out, and that was 95. So right around 96. And I used 3D till about 2001. So almost 20 years later, I'm actually getting back into 3D, and it's been a wild ride. Not that I want to change, like I'll never stop painting, but I'm learning 3D as a way to like feed into my paintings a little bit. I'm exploring that more. It's been a lot of fun. Anyway, ever since like 1995, I wanted to work on like Toy Story. Like Toy Story kind of changed my life in that way. I wanted to work at Pixar. Like my ultimate goal in life in 1996 was to be a Pixar animator. And oh, hi Rash. Rash is here. So yeah, I always wanted to do that. And then when I started learning about fine art drawing, like figure drawing, let's say, and like I got into plein air painting, I considered being trying to get into fine art, but I never supplanted my goals and hopes of working in the entertainment industry. I always wanted to work in animation, and I still love animation. It's in a way, it's my first art love was animation. Because if you guys remember from a few minutes ago, I tried to be an animator first. I tried to get into Sheridan College to study animation, and who knows how my life would be different if I had got in. I don't know. I might be an animator right now. I don't know, but only by getting rejected from Sheridan and pursuing, my own art study outside of traditional schooling, only then did I discover painting. But anyway, I had a few, ideas about selling plein air paintings and maybe getting into some galleries. And every now and then that thought comes up, surfaces in my mind. But yeah, I don't think that life is for me. Like, I don't think I would be interested in like fine art painting all the time. I don't really enjoy it as much as I think I need to. Whereas with like, just randomly going out to sketch from life and coming back and bringing my knowledge into a traditional or like a digital illustration, that seems to fit more with my personality. Just need a drink of water here. Albert says, I visited the studios when they were working on Toy Story. Oh, nice. You visited Pixar? I still have never been to Pixar. I've only been to California once in my whole life. And I was in San Diego then, so not even close to the animation studios. Sam says, since we are getting into the industry, what obstacles might a person encounter getting a job if he or she starts late in life? Well, let's see. That's a good question. I'll have to guess a little bit, because one of the things that is regrettable for me, and I've only noticed it after like I've chatted with some fellow YouTubers like Keenan Lafferty, who was nice enough to have me on his channel, and recently I went on the Modern Day James live chat. I I think I'm a little out of touch with the industry because I work freelance, and I've been freelancing since 2012, I think, maybe 2013. And like I'm also not like I live in Germany, which is far away from America, and most of my work is for American clients. Like I'm out of touch with people in the industry because, like, you know, I've been in the industry for like 10 years now or more, like 12 years. So like when I first started, I could tell you everyone. I could tell you everyone who worked at Blue Sky in the color department, everyone at Pixar. Like I knew all their work. I kept up with it. But now, like, I just don't. I don't keep up with who's in the industry. So, and I also, regrettably, I don't keep up as much as I should with the work that people are doing. One of the reasons I actually am starting doing 3D again is not because I want to make 3D renderings, but I want to keep up with this industry shift of a lot of people are composing their paintings in 3D first and using that as kind of the backbone of the painting. And like, I didn't have those skills, which is weird because back in 1997, I could do the 3D part of that, but then I lost touch with it. So one of the things that's getting me back into 3D now is, like, in a way, I want to keep my skills evolving in line with the industry. Thankfully, I'm having a ton of fun with 3D. I have Blender sitting on my desktop right here. Blender is a free app, and it's awesome. I'll show you. Let's see. I can actually show you. Angle scene. Is it this? Yeah. So here's like a 3D scene I modeled. I mean, it's nothing impressive, but I had to paint the interior of a library for a client, and I modeled this simple scene out of basic geometry, and you know, over here I could render it. And so you see this render? I would bring this into Photoshop and use that as like a basis for my perspective, because this is very complex perspective, right? Like if you asked me to draw this, first of all, I would be way too lazy to draw it accurately. And secondly, well, I would bring a different flavor to it, but in this particular case, I wanted the perspective to look believable. So I modeled it in 3D first. And well, Albert's been doing 3D since '88. That's awesome. So Albert's laughing at my primitive 3D scene here, but it works as an overlay in Photoshop. Then once I'm in Photoshop, I will like massacre this. I will draw lines over it, paint values over it. Like I'll paint characters into it. I'll change things. Like I'll morph things around. I will completely like desecrate it. But it actually has been pretty cool for, you know, steering me in a different direction. I have yet to apply it to like my own personal work, but I think that's coming soon. I'll try it out. I just did a job that required a lot of perspective drawing. It's an illustrated book for Disney, and I can't show any art. I wish I could, but once I have the clearance to do it, I will actually make a YouTube video about it, like my experience working on a very like realistic style of illustration. And it was like I said, it was a very realistic style. So like perspective had to be accurate. I had to like make sure it looked like filmic, right? Like I had a lot of reference. It's for the Nutcracker movie that's coming out. It's coming out in Christmas 2018. And so I had a ton of reference from the film. So I was like looking at, you know, even things like lens distortion I was looking at, and like, but it was all drawn by hand. I had to draw everything by hand. And it was a nightmare. It was fun because I got to paint like Craig Mullins, who's one of my favorite painters. I got to paint very loose, but still realistic. But the technical part was a nightmare because I'm not, you can imagine like the same kind of fun brushwork that I do in my paintings like this, that exact attitude does not bode too well for perspective when things should be technically correct. And I think everyone here falls in a different part of that spectrum. You know, if there's a spectrum, like, let me just paint into this. You know, on one hand here, this is the spectrum. You know, this is like total abstract, and this is like totally technical. I'm probably here, like my base like aptitude, or not even aptitude, because I could do this if I really wanted to. Like I have the knowledge and skill to do it, but like my heart is here. But for the Disney one, it was an interesting thing because like my shot design had to be here, but my painting could be here. And it was very interesting to manage that. And this actually fits in with Vrumian's question, which is, I'm a pretty slow drawer. Do you have any suggestions for improving speed? So I have two things to say about that. The first is, the main way that I was able to start sketching and do like sketchbook sketches and get like, you know, accuracy quickly was life drawing. And when I say life drawing, I mean drawing the figure who is posing for you. Like in my case, it was like the classical, like the nude figure on a podium, right? I did life drawing for many years. I also taught life drawing at a university. One of my first teaching gigs was teaching life drawing. And namely, specifically drawing gestures, which is like anything from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, I would consider a gesture drawing. And when you do a gesture drawing, I'm just searching for something really quickly, making sure there's no nudity or anything. Let me see. Okay, so like this here will work. Let me bring this into Photoshop. Let me make a new layer. Fill it with white. Okay, so we have our model here, and in my opinion, it's best to do this from life. I'm obviously only showing you from a photo because, you know, it's the nature of these live chats. But you know, set the timer for a minute. Okay, so a gesture drawing that takes a minute would look something like this. I did this for years and years and years, and I still do it sometimes. I'm drawing too large. Sorry, let me just shrink this down. So what, we're at about, 30 seconds right now? You can stop the clock maybe. So this is like maybe a minute drawing or just under a minute. And it's not totally, obviously it's not like fully accurate, and anatomically the proportions are weird, but the thing that's there is the basic idea of the pose. And then what I could do is like, you can, you know, draw over it and like refine the drawing a little bit, which I'm not going to do live for you guys right now, but you can, you know, go over the forms, refine those forms, get the drawing to be more technically accurate, but while maintaining that feeling. So by doing a lot of gesture drawing and stuff like that, I built up, and that, by the way, the drawing I just did was like not very good. It was just, let's try another one. That's the point though. They're not supposed to be good drawings. They're supposed to be just quick indications of movement and weight. So like I really see this C-curvy motion to this model. That's like going to be the first thing that I want to go for. Well, I'll get the head in first, but this C-curviness, and this also, there's a C-curve in the hand, C-curve, C-curve. This is the kind of thing, when I said I studied with Nick Kalislian, this is the kind of thing we studied. This sense of gesture. I did not study painting with Nick. I didn't mention that. Nick did not teach me how to paint. I learned that on my own and from like workshops and stuff. But Nick helped me get this idea of very quick, again, I'm drawing too large. I always do that. This idea of quick indications of gesture and capturing the weight and feeling and emotion of somebody and doing it very quickly. And this kind of thing will obviously sharpen your figure drawing, but it will also sharpen your confidence or like bolster your confidence and engender confidence. Because a lot of art, like no one starts confident. No artist starts confidently. And I think one of the things that, that's symptomatic, or I should say slow drawing can be symptomatic of low confidence. And I'm not saying this is exactly describes you, Vrumian. I don't know you outside of this live chat, so I don't know for sure. But when it comes to gaining confidence, capturing someone's weight and gesture in a very quick way is a very, very good exercise. And don't worry about drawing pretty. Like, this is not a pretty drawing, but it is like, I mean, there's all kinds of like technical mistakes here, but it's a blueprint. It's kind of a foundation for something better. And like the emotional content is there. So I would really recommend that. Now, I said I had two suggestions for drawing more quickly, and my second one is going to contradict my first one, but everyone will have to reconcile it in their own way. And that is, um, when I want to paint fast, I approach it by painting slowly. And the reason that makes sense is because when I paint slowly, I can get everything right as I go. Whereas if I paint fast, like if I'm putting down brushstrokes like this, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to draw well, get my values right, get my lighting right. There's just no way. It's going to look like a mess. And it might be a beautiful mess, but it's a mess nonetheless that I have to like refine. But if I paint slowly and methodically, and I kind of think ahead a little bit, the benefit there is you'll actually get to a finish faster. At least I can. I don't know if this works for everyone, but this is just my own experience. Because I've spent so many years, well, I don't know if so many years, I've spent a long time so far studying the fundamentals. I mean, 30 years from now, I'll have spent 30 more years on it. So maybe I shouldn't say so many years, but I've spent yeah, Silver says it, slow is steady, steady is fast. Yeah. I think that's like a Navy saying, something like that. I can't remember what it is. It's a nice saying, but it's something like that. Slow is steady and steady is fast. Anyway, because I've learned a lot of fundamental stuff. When I paint slowly, I can apply the fundamentals. Now, and I can apply them methodically and correctly. Whereas if I'm painting fast, all of a sudden I just have a big mess that I have to now go back and fix, which is not how I like to paint. I like to paint slowly, methodically, and ultimately it's a quicker painting. Now, if you don't have your fundamentals down yet, you probably won't be able to do that because you won't know if you're applying the fundamentals correctly. So everyone here is on a journey where you're learning your fundamentals. Like when I say fundamentals, drawing, perspective, there's so many. Drawing, perspective, form, gesture, anatomy, light, shadow, color, temperature. There's so many fundamentals, right? And we're all learning them and we're all refining them. One of the best things, I'm taking tangents here, but one of the best things, if I ever did anything right, it's that I never shied away from learning the fundamentals. Like there was a time in my life where I totally sucked at color, and maybe I still do, I don't know. But there's a time in my life where I had no idea how color worked, and I knew that I was lacking there, and I knew that I had to study it. So I did. I was never afraid of doing that, and I think if I have any good quality, it's that. And I've always, like, the same thing I'm doing today with 3D. I realized that like I'm kind of being left behind with 3D. So I'm like, okay, let's start watching Blender tutorials and learn it. That's one of my only, if I could like pat myself on the back, I would do it in that area. When it comes to applying it, I'm just as clumsy as everyone else. I make mistakes all the time. I make perspective mistakes all the time, and I have to remind myself to slow down, get it right. Like I do all the same things everyone else does. But I've always been diligent with like gathering fundamentals. So I don't even know how I got started on that tangent, but it was about drawing fast. Yeah. So when Didon says he says I'm a slow draftsman, or he says about himself that he's a slow draftsman. That's okay. Like being slow is not inherently a bad thing. If you're slow and your fundamentals are also bad, then maybe that's not so good because you're going to take forever and your drawing's not going to be good. But if your fundamentals are tight and you draw slowly, that is totally fine. And, rush deadlines notwithstanding, if you draw slowly, chances are you'll actually be able to hit your deadlines more reliably. Because when I set out on a painting now, I kind of know, like, okay, this painting will require X and Y and Z fundamentals, and it'll take me this long to do them. And this painting should take me about 10 hours. And usually, because I've been, a professional painter for like 12 years or 13 years now, I'm generally pretty correct about my time evaluations. But if I'm doing a personal piece, like a painting that's completely randomly out of my head, like when I painted this one, I had no real plan. I had a basic thumbnail, but I had no like the thumbnail was like chicken scratch on paper. It didn't have anything worked out. It was just, all I had was this shape. When I'm painting a personal piece, I have no idea how long it'll take me because I'm totally like at the whims of like creativity, like the classic, like the idea of like following your muse. That's what I do when I paint a personal piece. So I have no idea how long it'll take because I'll erase half the canvas. You know, I'll crop out 3/4 of it, or I'll change something so dramatically that I have to basically start over. That's the nature of how I work. If any of you here have seen my digital painting 1 video, you know how I work. I started in digital painting 1. I started painting, I think I was painting a cemetery. It's been a few years since I made that video. And I ended up painting like a boat race. So I went from cemetery to boat race. And like that's how crazy my personal pieces will shift. It only looks like I knew what I was doing at the end when you see the final result. But when I'm working for a client, I can't do that. So that's why I'll rough things out in 3D, or I'll do a preliminary sketch. But, you know, I'm totally happy to work slowly when I'm doing my own personal work, because when I work slowly, I can also maybe explore things too. When I work slowly for clients, I'm like judiciously applying fundamentals. But when I work slowly for myself, I'm exploring. So there's 2 different kinds of slow, right? So don't necessarily think of slow as being bad. I've just given you 2 reasons why slow is good. So it's up to you to reconcile. All right, let me back up in the chat here. Julia says that Craig Mullins has a digital painting course on Schoolism. Yes, and I'm actually watching it as we speak. Well, not literally right now, but I'm on week 7. I signed up for a month of Schoolism just to watch Craig Mullins, because like if that guy does a course, you have to watch it, as far as I'm concerned. And it's very good. It's very, it's not for beginners, I have to say. It's good, but Craig Mullins is like, and this is actually something that I think a lot of teachers battle with. Like the more experienced you get, I can speak for myself here, the more experienced I get, the harder it is for me to talk about fundamental, like basic fundamentals, because it's just like, think of like tying your shoes, right? Everyone here can tie, we can tie our shoes with our eyes, literally with our eyes closed. We can probably do it in our sleep. When you're a kid learning to tie your shoes, it's very difficult. And there's a huge gap there. And a good teacher, as far as I'm concerned, has to be able to bridge that gap and go back to the student's level. And when I say level, I don't mean it condescendingly, but we're all at different levels, right? Like Craig Mullins is miles beyond me. A good teacher has to go to the student, meet them where they're at, and be able to explain, like, okay, here's how you tie your shoes. Make a loop. Now make another loop. Now tuck that loop underneath and pull tight. You have to be able to do that with art. And it's been a constant struggle for me when I do lessons, like, how do I communicate clearly the things that worked for me? You know, at the beginning of this chat, I drew those boxes. I don't think I have them anymore. I erased them, but those boxes, right? Those squares, the wobbly square versus the sharp square. That's the kind of thing that's very difficult for teachers. And Craig Mullins doesn't really try and bridge that gap in his Schoolism class. It's brilliant in its own right, but it's not for beginners. That's just my thoughts on it. But Craig Mullins is like, maybe if I had like 2 favorite painters, it might be like Sargent and then Craig Mullins. I don't know, but I love Craig Mullins' work. And I signed up for a month of Schoolism just to watch it, and I recommend you guys do as well. Although if you're completely a new artist, new to drawing and painting, I wouldn't recommend it. There are better classes. Dennis, I'm not sure. Hi, Dennis. I'm not sure if I said hello. Funny about Sheridan College, Dennis says, I had applied to it at the end of high school, but I couldn't afford it. Instead, I went into computer science at Ottawa U. Nice. Computer science, that's cool. Now I'm getting close to retirement, Dennis continues, and I'm learning digital painting. I do find that some of what you do seems so intuitive, like a jazz musician with music. It's great hearing about your journey. Yeah, thanks, Dennis. And it's cool to hear about yours too. Yeah, so like that's the thing. It's back to the tying your shoes thing. You know, the fundamentals becomes just part of you. Like when I'm drawing a shape of value, I don't, like if I relate it back to episode 6 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting, and this is how all artists work. I'm sure everyone here in this chat has reached this to certain degrees in their work. like I don't think about halftones anymore and shadows. Like I know them so intimately because I've been working with them as a professional now for 12 years. Like I know what's shadow, I know what's light. I can determine, I've become adept with converting colors to values, like in my head. Like I've honed that. Like I've earned that over. If I started learning this in 2000, I've earned these skills over 18 years. So these things, certain things become second nature, just like a jazz musician learning scales. Now, I'm the farthest thing away from a perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect artist, and I'm far from it. But like I said, certain tasks, I'm like, I have to remind myself how to tie my shoes. Like when I paint, when I do perspective, I have to really remind myself, okay, vanishing point goes here. That means that, this line goes like that. And no, Marco, you can't just sketch in your ground plane because it'll be off because you're an imperfect human being. So if we want this to be accurate, you got to make a grid. Like I have to remind myself of these things when I do technical stuff. Maybe like a jazz musician playing Beethoven would suddenly have to remind herself, how to do certain things. But when I'm just improvising, like on my own personal work, like you guys can see like these brush strokes in here. It's a little pixelated now, but you can see these brush strokes, right? When I'm painting these brush strokes, yeah, it's like jazz. I'm like, okay, I'm painting reflected light and I'm being fun with edges and fun with texture. I'm just having fun. And that's the part of art that's unteachable. Can't teach that part, and I would never want to try because I don't want to teach anyone how to paint like me. That's impossible. Just like I could never paint like J.C. Leyendecker, which I talk about in some of my other videos. I love J.C. Leyendecker like to the ends of the earth, but I just can't do it. I can't paint like him because he has a different thing inside him. Like what makes him tick is different than what makes me tick. So I had to face that a bunch of years ago when I really wanted my paintings to look like Leyendecker's. I had to face the facts that I couldn't, or face the music. We'll stick with the metaphor. I couldn't do it. And I had to, everything inside me was compelling me to make brushstrokes like this, like what I do now naturally. And I had to find a license. Like I had to give myself an internal license that said it's okay to do what it is you want to do. But another thing that's difficult for me as an artist now is one of the things I face as a challenge is because it's like old man syndrome, because I've developed in my own style and my own taste for, going on 18 years now, I find it hard to mimic other artists versus 10 years ago. It was actually much easier for me to mimic other artists because I wasn't as far along in my own development. So there are certain times when I'll get a job offer that I turn down because I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that anymore. They want me to paint recently some client wanted me to paint this super rendered, like airbrushed rendered stuff. I'm like, no, I can't. I would let you down. I can't do it. And I just I know I probably could do it if there were a gun to my head, but thankfully there is not a gun to my head. And I just, I was honest with myself and I'm like, I'm so far away from that kind of stuff that it would be pulling teeth for me to do that. So I'm not gonna do it. So that's the challenge I face now because I don't always want my work to look just one way. I want to have some breadth in terms of styles. And actually that Disney job that I mentioned earlier, which again, unfortunately I can't show any, you'll see it later when I have clearance, but that painting job was great because it had technical stuff like perspective, but I still was allowed to paint loose. So it was this nice middle ground and it kind of got my foot in the water a little bit. So Sam is a retired IT manager. Cool. Computer programmer. Nice. So when did you start painting, Sam? A few years ago? I know we've talked a bunch, you and I, but I actually don't know how long you've been painting for. Let's see. Julia asks, do you ever struggle with inner criticism or perfectionism that holds you back? And do you have any idea how to deal with it? I'm not sure if you were here in the chat earlier, Julia, when I was talking about writing. I'm not a professional writer, but I do try and write. In writing, yes, I struggle with it a lot, and it holds me back a lot. And I'm to this day, I don't know how to solve it. I'm dealing with it. Somehow, I don't struggle with that when I paint. And I think the reason why is because over the years, I've learned to trust the process with painting. And again, it all goes back to the fundamentals. Because with painting, I'm much more fundamentally sound in painting than I am with writing. So when I paint, I know where the painting is weak when I see it. And I think this is the key to my advice on knowing how to deal with it. Your inner criticism. Your inner criticism will say something nondescript like, "Oh, your painting sucks. Haha, bye." That's what your inner criticism will do. It'll give you something completely non-helpful. It'll make you feel bad and not give you a way to fix it. So the way to fix it, your logical brain needs to click in. Your like, what is it, left brain or right brain, whatever brain is the logical side, has to click in. You got to get out of artist mode and say, okay, maybe my painting is looking bad, but why? Why is it looking bad? I've given you a few reasons over here as to why a painting can look bad. Namely, I showed you how a lot of painters sacrifice their halftones and make their halftones look like shadow. Now, if I identify that problem in my painting, I know how to fix it, and I can shut up the inner critic for a second because I can fight back and be like, "Oh yeah, inner critic, you're right. The painting does look like crap, and it's because my halftones are too dark." So your fundamentals are going to help you answer your inner critics. And just remember, if you're like me, your inner critics are not ever going to give you helpful advice. They're just going to give you that emotional twinge, that irksome like twinge that says you're not good. And that's not helpful. But it is helpful in the sense that maybe something is wrong, but you have to fix it with logic. And with painting, it's so easy to get lost in like, artsy fartsy stuff, but the fundamentals are always what drives paintings. And, if you like my YouTube videos, you probably know that I try and focus, especially my recent stuff, like anything in the last 2 years, I try and focus on the fundamentals. Like I don't try and teach people, I don't try and tell people like, here's how to make a whimsical texture. No, I don't care about that stuff. You can do however you want. But I do care that your halftones are not too dark. And I do care that your shadows are darker than your lights. That's the stuff I care about, both as an artist and as a teacher, because that's the stuff that'll help you deal with your inner critic. When your inner critic says, "Hey, that painting is not looking very good," you can say, "Oh, yeah, my shadows," if I did a bit of painting here, I can, if I were losing my shadows, sorry, I am on the wrong layer. Like, oh, suddenly my shadows are gone, like, or my shape, like if I'm doing this, suddenly my shape is compromised. I've just made a shape that is completely unclear, right? It should be something very simple like this, because that's what a sphere in shadow looks like. I've completely compromised that shape by doing artsy fartsy brushwork. So that's where I'll be like, okay, it didn't work. It looks like crap. My inner critic is right, but my inner critic has no idea why it looks like crap. So I have to apply that logical mindset. And it's because my shapes got compromised, and my values too. Often they go hand in hand. Shapes and values go hand in hand. All right. I'm scrolling up in the chat. Albert, what 3D software have you used throughout your career, by the way? I'm interested because 3D is like a career that I never took. It's like the path in life that I abandoned because I started with 3D. And I'm always like, I love old programs like Softimage. Like I loved Softimage 3D. I don't know why I have a soft spot for like old programs like that. So I had a pirated copy of Softimage because it was like what, $10,000 back in the 90s. So I found a pirated copy on Windows NT, and I loved learning on that. I still have old like VHS tapes in my parents' house, like training tapes. Okay, so okay, Sam. I read his 13-year-old son. Sam says he likes manga. I like comic books. Nice. That's cool. That must be fun drawing with your son. I don't have kids yet, but one day, and I can't wait to draw with them. Then Albert follows up. To be honest, I totally missed those fundamentals from my art education. They weren't taught like that over at my art school. Yeah, that's unfortunate, Albert. And I know what you mean. There are a lot of art schools that like they'll teach like techniques like how to make like prints or etchings or whatever. Like I remember back in high school, I took an art class, but I wasn't like they didn't teach me how to draw. Like they taught us process, like how to develop photographs like in a darkroom, which was cool, but like it doesn't help you take good photos. How to how to make a I can't remember what it was called, like a woodcut. Like we learned how to make a woodcut, and it was cool. But did it teach me the art fundamentals? No. And a lot of art schools like seem to like hide behind stuff that sounds good in a curriculum, but at the end of the day, like if you want to be a painter and you don't know what a halftone is, you're in big trouble. And the best people for the best teachers, I think, for learning like strict fundamentals is the atelier type style, like the Watts atelier. If you want to learn like basic, not when I say basic, I don't mean bad, I don't mean easy. I mean like the most foundational stuff. Guys like the Watts atelier or like Glenn Vilpu, stuff like that will be great because they really care about that stuff. And I try and do that in my own YouTube videos. I try and teach the stuff that will help anyone become better, regardless of the style you use or the medium you use. I always there's a little alarm bell that goes off in my head when I'm talking about too much artsy fartsy stuff or too much personal stuff, because I don't think that helps anyone. I always try and go back to the fundamentals. Let's see. I'm following the chat here. Albert says, I battle perfectionism all the time. Yeah, so yeah, perfectionism is a battle, guys. Everyone goes through it. Like I said, for me, over time, being fundamentally sound. And when I say that, I'm still learning the fundamentals. Like you never get to the point where you're above learning the fundamentals, because the second you do that, you're just going to get lazy with it, right? So I'm always like I know what I don't think there's a fundamental that I'm not aware of, is what I'm trying to say. I know what the fundamentals are. Now, when it comes to using them, obviously I'm better. Like perspective is one I happen to be weak at, which is why I liked that Disney job, because it helped me bolster it. So I had to do it for a client. But knowing what the fundamentals are, like the ins and outs of them, and then what that will do is it'll bring them to the forefront of your consciousness when you're working. And you can say to yourself, okay, why is this not working? Maybe with writing, one of the reasons why I face it with writing, like the perfectionism battle, like maybe I don't know enough about the process of like coming up with, fiction stuff. Like maybe I haven't explored that enough, and I'm getting lost in the creative side. If you've listened to my, the whole creativity in the campfire is all about that. Struggles with your like searching for an idea or taking an idea and finding what's true in it, and like how you can express certain ideas. Like these topics are on my mind a lot, and I struggle with them just like anyone else. But yeah, I'll say it one last time because I'm repeating myself horribly, but the fundamentals, I think, are what will save you. Albert says, I always compare to my absolute heroes and fail miserably. Yeah. Oh, I do that too, Albert. I already mentioned J.C. Leyendecker. That one I had to concede defeat, not because the reason I conceded defeat with Leyendecker was because I realized that, like I said, I just didn't have it wasn't in my constitution to paint like him. Like if you look at, I'll show you, if you guys are unfamiliar with J.C. Leyendecker, I'll bring him up. He was he was one of Norman Rockwell's teachers, and I just want to bring up an image to show you. Like the guy is a fantastic designer, and one of the things, let's see, let me just bring up this one. This is an okay example. One of the things that I love about Leyendecker is like the design to his brushstrokes. You see this? Like every brushstroke has this direction to it. It's almost like he wove together this painting like it's a lattice work or something. And he does this all the time. You can even see it like broad strokes like this. He has this sense about him, like this linear kind of sense that I mean, I love it. And 10 years ago, I wanted to emulate it. Like I wanted my work to be that, but it's just not in me. This is what's in me. This manic kind of painterly stuff. This is what I have, like my mind and my muscles have no problem doing this. But when it comes to the Leyendecker stuff, this, like I can do it. I can technically do it. If I had to copy Leyendecker, I could, but it's just not a part of how my brain works. So I had to abandon it. So, a part of your creative struggles will be also like seeing what it is that's in you versus not. So that's when I learned the lesson. Like, even though you might love a certain artist, it just might not be in you to actually do it yourself. You can study from that artist, and then you're forcing yourself to do it, and that's totally fine. But when it comes to like your own work, your own heart and soul, that is where you shouldn't. I don't think you should hold yourself up to anyone else there. When it comes to studying your fundamentals, of course, then yeah, hold yourself up to John Singer Sargent if you're painting. Hold yourself up to Mike Mignola if you're designing shapes. Hold yourself up to Drew Struzan for composition, or like Muka or something. Hold yourself up to all these greats. But when it comes to your own work, try to let that go. If you can, just try and let it go. When I do my own personal painting now, I don't compare it to anyone. Like I let it be what it is. And my work, the way I think about it, I will just live or die off the fundamentals. That's where my work will succeed or not. And I hope, like, I would never show the public a painting that isn't fundamentally sound, because I make sure it is. I'll start a painting like this. This is how I start a personal piece. It's completely messy, and like you can only see the barest glimmer of what might be. I would never, I'll show you guys this, but I would never show this unless I was teaching a lesson. This is not ready for public consumption. To bring that to this takes obviously the fundamentals, but I took so many left turns and right turns and brushwork, crazy brushwork, that it's not even worthwhile for me to compare this to like Sargent, because like, of course it's different. It's because I'm not Sargent. It's going to be different. So, but what you can compare with your personal work, you can compare like, does the light read clearly? Does the color temperature kind of make sense? That's the fundamental stuff you can compare. But when it comes to like the brush strokes and like the look of it and the design of it, try not to compare yourself to, to your inspirations there. Let it be your own. That's my advice. That might help with the perfectionism thing too. I'm reading about the 3D stuff now, Albert. That's cool. SGI. I never touched an SGI. I think I was a little too young for that, because in the 90s, I was born in 1982. So, in the mid 90s, I was like a teenager. So I couldn't afford an SGI, and I didn't have a job at a studio. Is it true that like an iPhone is more powerful than an SGI? Is that true? Okay, so let's see. So, hi, Chanisara. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. You asked a question about dealing with art block. I think that's exactly what I was just talking about. So I hope that helps answer that question. Fundamentals. If you're struggling with if your art block has to do with coming up with ideas, then my suggestion there is keep in mind that most times the very first brushstrokes you put down on your canvas, like I can bring this up again. The very first brushstrokes, like the idea here was a monster and a kid on a bridge reading a book, right? Which I've executed here. You've all seen this painting. But the first brushstrokes you put down, they may mislead you into thinking that your idea is not good, because you're painting, like at this stage, my early stage here, the painting's not very good yet. Like it doesn't look good. It looks promising, but it doesn't look good, right? Whereas this painting is done and it hopefully looks good. So don't let your early stages fool you into thinking your work is not promising, or like that you can't get yourself out of it. And this is like, I'm being hypocritical here, because this is exactly what I run into with my writing. When I write something, like let's say chapter 1 or whatever, I write chapter 1 and I'm like, it's just not very good. But you don't actually have the right to say that yet, because you haven't explored it yet. If I write chapter 1, I have no idea if it's good or not, because I haven't written the rest of it. If you only critique your work based on what's on the canvas now, you'll probably go into despair, because of course your first brushstrokes are not going to look good. Like, it's your first stuff, right? Nothing, in this initial sketch, I've changed most of it. The thing I did not change is composition. The one thing I can look at this initial sketch and see promise in is the composition. One thing I'm particularly proud of, and this doesn't always happen, see how the monster's head is cut off there? I kept that. And that's something that doesn't always happen, but you can see that, like, I noticed that. It's funny, because remember when I was doing those little gesture drawings like half hour ago, I was drawing too large for the paper. That's why the monster's head is cut off in this picture, because I drew him too big. I always do that with my tablet. I have a small tablet, and I just draw things too big. It's just a common, I don't do it on paper, but I do it on digital all the time. And I cut off the monster, but I'm like, you know what? That actually, let's just go with that. And there's an element to that in your creative process of just going with it. Like, write chapter 1 and just go with it. Like, write chapter 2, then chapter 3. Do, start off with something and explore it. And don't let the concept of failure scare you. Like, embrace it, because in a failure, you'll learn so much. Like I keep saying, I'm learning 3D right now. Yesterday before bed, I tried to model a quick cartoon head based on one of my drawings, and I failed miserably. I wish I could show you the file, but I deleted it. Like, I didn't save it. I tried to model a 3D head based on an illustration that I had done. Like, one of the characters I did, it wasn't this kid, but I basically took this kid into 3D and tried to model that head in a quick way. And I failed horribly. But you know what I did? I laughed and I said, well, I learned a couple things, and then I went to bed. And I didn't let it bother me, because I know that the next time, this was just last night, by the way, because I know that if I model another head in 3D tonight, it'll be better. And the next one will be even better. So you're always on this progression, that looks something like, if I just go to my blank canvas here, you're always on this progression, your improvement, well, you'll have ups and downs, but in general, your curve will go up, right? In general. But it's marked by failures. Fail. But you get, better each time. And then by the time you go here, maybe you start having a success fail. Like, there's some things in here that's good and some that's not good. But it's better, you've climbed. So you're always, this trajectory is going to keep happening. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it will only happen if you are diligent enough to be studying fundamentals. Again, what are fundamentals? Like halftones. What are halftones? What makes light different from shadow? Like, are my lights and shadows separate? When I say that, I mean, like, if you look at this in grayscale, especially if I dialed up the contrast a bit, this is a great way to test your paintings. Use the legacy, dial up your contrast. Does Photoshop leave behind clear shapes? I showed you this in 10 Minutes to Better Painting, episode 6, where I did that Frank Frazetta. I broke down Frazetta's painting and John Singer Sargent's painting, and I upped the contrast. Is Photoshop leaving behind very clear shapes? If not, that's a problem with your fundamentals. It has nothing to do with your creativity. It's your fundamentals. In this case, you can see there are very clear shapes. The light, anything that's in light, is like bright white, because Photoshop, I've upped the contrast so much that Photoshop has just basically made it white. That means a lot to me. I put a lot of work into making sure those shapes are the correct value. If you're not doing that, then it's very likely that you will not experience this growth. It's very likely you'll just be on a plane, fail, and you won't progress. This is where, taking classes and watching YouTube videos is good, because it will help you not do this, and it'll help you go on an upward trajectory. It won't stop you from failing. Taking a class won't stop you from failing. You'll still fail every time, or not every time. You'll still fail a lot, just like I still fail a lot. But the one thing that my learning has taught me, I'm at a place where I can do a failure or start painting a failure, but I can catch it early enough to know why it's failing, and I can turn it into success because I can see like, okay, it's failing because my composition is not clear enough. Okay, how do I change that? That's a fundamentals question. Or my painting is not working right now because my values are too muddy or too close together, or I'm not being, I need more contrast or I need less contrast. Those are all fundamental decisions. That's where like taking a class can help you, because it'll, learning from a teacher who has this stuff more or less sorted out will help you direct your inner criticism kind of thing. This relates back to Julia's question about the criticism. Yes, Julia, I do know the Story Grid by Sean Coyne. I love that podcast. I've actually learned a lot about writing from that podcast. That's a great podcast. Actually, in 10 Minutes to Better Painting, episode 2, the opening quotation is from Sean Coyne, which is funny. So let's see here. Albert says Alias Power Animator. Oh man, I remember that name. Sorry, I could talk 3D, geeking out about 3D for hours, but I won't do that now. And by the way, I know we started like what, 15 minutes late, so we'll go till 15 minutes past the hour. I don't want to shortchange my 2-hour promise here. All right, so where are we? I'm reading your messages, Albert. I'm just not going to read them out loud because I think I'm the only one here who, you and I are the only two here, people who actually care about computational power in the 90s with 3D software. Julia says humor can be very powerful in teaching. Yeah. I think you mean in teaching. I agree. I like Proko's channel. It's got some funny jokes in there. Different kind of humor than what I use. Actually, these days, I try and reserve my humor for 10 Minutes to Better Painting. If you compare like 10 Minutes to Better Painting versus my ambient occlusion lecture, they're two very different feelings. All right, so Samuel posted a Samuel Beckett quote that everyone should check out. Yeah, fail again, fail better. That's it, fail better. Samuel Beckett nailed it. Didon says, I teach drawing fundamentals, and with fundamentals, I realize the responsibility is immense. It's a great way of saying it. Do you make mistakes while teaching or when trying to solve problems together with students? Do I make mistakes while teaching? I'm not quite sure what you mean. I mean, yes, I probably make mistakes in everything I do, but I guess with teaching, I just try and do my best to be a clear communicator, I guess. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Didon. Maybe if you don't mind clarifying what you mean when you say, do I make mistakes while teaching? I'm not quite sure what you mean. And then Albert says, I think teaching is the best way to learn. Teaching is itself very valuable. Yeah, I agree. And that's actually in the beginning of this live chat, I can't remember who asked, but someone asked about the lesson I've learned outside of art. And I talked about clear communication. And I said that I learned it through reading. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I learned it through teaching. Of course, I can't believe I forgot that. Reading, definitely, but teaching, because when I first started as a teacher, I mean, I don't think I was a very good teacher. Any skills I have as a teacher now is because I've been teaching for 10 years. And I know, like, if you guys go back to my very first YouTube video, which is still on YouTube, I don't have it in me to delete it. I've deleted other videos in the past, but that one, it's just nostalgic for me because it's my very first one. But if you go back and watch my very first YouTube video, it's not good. I sound shy, unconfident. I sound like I don't quite know what I'm talking about, but I'm pretending that I do. That's how I think about it anyway. When I listen to that video now, it sounds like I'm faking it. And to a degree I was, because this was like 10 years ago. I don't think I had the skills 10 years ago to be a teacher. But I'm constantly looking at like that idea of clear communication. And I wonder if I can be fast enough. I wonder if I can pull up an example. Oh man, episode 5. Okay, so wait. This right here is my script when I make my YouTube video, my 10 minutes to better painting videos. I write a script. It's not a script. It's more of a brainstorming document that I turn into a script. And this is it. It's like a living document. I actually shared one of these in my Patreon. In the Patreon, you'll have to, if you scroll down a bit in my post, you'll see it. And the thing I'm trying to find is like a subtle example of how I'll write something that's not clear and then I'll change it. But I don't know if I can do that without wasting everyone's time. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for this live chat because I have to spend too much time. But anyway, like here's a simple example. Here's something I wrote in for the color video. I wrote those. Here's the sentence I wrote. The term color harmony has always struck me as one of those inscrutable art theory concepts that only master artists seem to understand. That's my sentence. That's not a very good sentence because there's too many words. In the video, in my YouTube video, this thought the thought is good. The thought is that color harmony is hard and that I always felt that I couldn't understand it. My sentence is not good because it does not communicate that concept very clearly. It has too many words. It has the word inscrutable in it, which is what I call a $2 word. It's a word that not everyone knows. I'm sure you guys all know it, but I don't think everyone, I think like out of 10 people, maybe 4 people don't know the word inscrutable. So why would I actually say that? It makes sense to me because I know the word, but in the video, the line I actually deliver in the video is well, let's see. Let's go to the video itself and let's see what I actually say. Videos. It's episode 5. I know exactly where it is. I don't know if you guys can hear the audio. Oh, we have to watch this 15-second ad. Sorry. Then I'll move on. I know I slowed the chat down to show you this, but I think it's important. Okay. We are in the video. And it's right in here. Okay, here it is.
Sounds intimidating. It always struck me as beautiful. Okay. Today's lesson is about color harmony. And color harmony sounds intimidating. It always struck me as one of those elite color theories that a lowly student like me would never be able to understand.
Yeah. Color harmony is intimidating. There's my thought, right? So this sentence boils down to 4 words. Color harmony is intimidating. So I changed my big sentence into 4 words. To me, that is a creative process. The thought was here, but the form was not here. So I changed it to 4 words, and then I changed the next line. I still use this. I still use the sentence and said, the words I said in the video is, it struck me as one of those elite color theories that a lowly student like me would never be able to understand. That is a sentence that everyone can understand, right? And it's very clear. And of course, I use the graphic of, this oppressive school teacher to sell it. So, I'll stop talking about this now because I know I've slowed down the chat a little bit. But that's what I go through with not just teaching, but like with painting. Like when I paint something first, it's a big mess. My ideas are not clear yet. And then I have to like step back and look at it and say, okay, what needs to be more clear? I'll show you an unfinished painting. This one. I would bet that many of you have probably not seen this painting because it never got finished. But you might look at it and you'd be like, well, it kind of looks finished. But the reason this is not finished is because just like my rambly sentence from a minute ago, this painting is, to me, is exactly like that rambly sentence. It's in that it's saying the overall thought is good, like a monster eating pizza in an office. That's cool. I like that. But I'm not directing the viewer well enough. I don't think the pizza slice, I don't think the monster, like if you zoomed out, you don't really know what this picture is. Whereas if you zoomed out here, it's pretty clear what that is. It's very clear what that is. If you zoomed out here, it's very clear what that picture is. But if you zoom out here, at least when I look at this, I don't really get the sense. I don't see the monster eating the pizza. What I see is that bright monitor behind the monster. That's because that creates the highest point of contrast right in here, which means the viewer's probably going to go there first. Usually what I try and do, or at least a little, I guess, compositional trick that I do, not a trick, but a compositional idea, fundamental idea really, is that I marry my contrast with my focal point. So in a painting like this, it's just dead basic. The owls are the focal point, and they have the most contrast. They pop out from the background. You don't get distracted by the background because it's completely less contrasty. With this painting, the bridge painting, it's a little more complex. There's more to it, but the highest contrast is generally centered around the characters. Whereas with this one, that's not true. The highest contrast is like in the background where the computer monitor is, and it kind of carries it directs the viewer the wrong way. So, you know, I decided, I remember when I was painting this, it was late at night, and I just decided to like stop. I don't know. I lost the inspiration for it. I just, went to bed. I just never picked it back up. But I could turn this into a painting that works, but I would have to do the same thing I did to my sentence, which is isolate what the idea is and then focus everything around that. And in this case, I'd have to bring some contrast into the pizza slice, find a way to still make that look like a computer monitor, but not have the contrast all there. Maybe all these little lights up here at the top are distracting. So I don't really want the viewer to look up there. So I'd have to like figure out all that stuff. All right. Rash says the poor intern. You know what's funny about the intern joke? The intern joke was originally like twice as mean. Like I was actually trying to like yell, like I was actually angry, like for real. And my wife heard it because I showed her I thought it was a good joke and I showed it to her, and she didn't laugh, but she felt bad for the cartoon character. Like she thought the anger was real, or like it felt real. And part of that was a compliment because it meant my acting was good. But like for her, the joke wasn't a joke. It was like me being mean. So I toned it down in the final episode to what it is now. And it's still kind of mean. Like I still wanted the joke to be that like like behind the scenes, I'm an asshole. Like that's the joke that I wanted. But sorry for the swear word, but that's the joke that I wanted. But I wanted to have the anger play as if it were slightly still jokey. Whereas my initial take on it was completely worse than that. Maybe if I can find the WAV file, I'll put it on Patreon so you can hear what it actually was. Oh, Dion says, mistakes while teaching, I meant, is providing answers that I'm in doubt with and that might, in effect, be misleading or confusing to the students, problem-solving wise. Ah, okay, yeah. By the way, Didon, I still owe you an email. You reminded me. You asked a question like a couple weeks ago in email. I told you I'd answer, and I forgot to answer. I was on vacation, and I forgot. I will reply to you. So with problem-solving and like student stuff, yeah, like I just kind of showed you with my lessons, I'm always going back to refine my teaching. And just like I did with that one sentence, I try and see where the communication is maybe not as clear, or I'm always changing my lesson plans as well. So, and my lessons, just like paintings, my lessons get better over time. So like I teach at CGMA, and obviously I teach on YouTube as well. All of those lessons that I'm putting out now are the result of like teaching those concepts differently in the past and seeing how the students reacted to them, like seeing what students remember from them or what they can do from them. And based on student feedback like that, like when I see a student assignment, it's very clear to me what someone is retaining or not retaining. And I'll adjust my lessons from that. Sam says, I often start paintings by painting them at a postage stamp size. Slowly, I make the image bigger. This mirrors my belief that a painting is an image slowly coming into focus. Yeah, I agree with that, Sam. I see it the same way. I start my paintings low res, and then I up res to them. So I'll start a painting like around, well, this JPEG here is a good example. This JPEG, which I saved directly, is 600 pixels wide, which is that's not a big painting at all. Like you could not print that. But what I'll do is I'll rough out. The thing I like about low res, first of all, to mirror Sam's point, it's great because it's good to evaluate your pictures small first and then up res only when they're working. But also just technically or like computationally, I like the way Photoshop's brushes handle when the canvas is small. It's just very fast, right? Photoshop is fast when the canvas is small and it doesn't have to do a whole lot of thinking. So I'll work small, and then, at a stage like this, I'll go to image size and I'll just up res it to, 1,000 pixels. And because my brush work, this works because I don't paint detail first. Like I get to that later. So I'll up res and then I'll paint over this, and then I'll up res that, and I'll paint, and I'll finally get to like 3,000 or 4,000 pixels. And by the way, these days I don't start at 600 pixels anymore. That's a bit too small. I'll start at around 1,000 pixels, and but I'll paint zoomed out like this, and then I'll evaluate as I go. Morgan Weisling, who I credit Morgan as one of my teachers, although I never studied with him like physically. I have his DVDs and I took a workshop with him, but I credit Morgan. Morgan Weisling taught me a lot of just really solid fundamentals. I'll put his name in the chat. Morgan Weisling. You guys can check it out. His website is just morganweisling.com, I think. But one of the things that Morgan Weisling really taught me was that same idea that Sam is mentioning. He taught it with portraits, and that is that he had this analogy. So this is totally Morgan Weisling's lesson, but he had this analogy in his DVD about a yearbook photo. You guys remember yearbook photos, right? Let me Google one right now. Yearbook photo. Sorry, I'll just do this on the screen. Yearbook class photo. Yeah, okay. So you guys we all have photos like this, right? And if, where the heads, in Morgan Weisling's words, the heads are the size of a pea. But if this were your yearbook photo, you would have no problem identifying these people. You could probably look back 20 years in your life and identify your friends, and the heads are the size of peas. And what that means is that our brains interpret shapes way, way more importantly than we interpret details. The fact that we can recognize people from our lives when their heads are just this big, that speaks to how we see images, how our brains see images. And Morgan Weisling used that lesson as a bridge into his portrait DVD, his first DVD, because he basically said when he paints an oil, when he paints a picture, he's only looking for those yearbook. He calls them yearbook shapes. He looks for the yearbook shapes. What is the shape of shadow? Like going back to, well, we can go back to Hellboy here. We can still tell that it's Hellboy even when I zoom out this far. So like, what is it? What is making this look like Hellboy? Well, it's these shapes, right? It's these light and shadow shapes. But what is that exact shape? How does it go? Let me just edit out these spikes for a second. Because, they're there, but they're just kind of flourish over top of this. What is this big shape doing to make it look like Hellboy? The fidelity of this shape, the way you reproduce this shape in your painting is everything. This is what will make your portrait succeed or fail, is your fidelity to these shapes, or the how close and how clear you can be with them. And Morgan Weisling really, really nailed that one home for me. the idea of yearbook shapes. That's what makes painters able to paint loose, you know, like well, you know, my paintings, like if you look at this, here's a painting that you probably never seen. So I'm not sure I've ever posted it. This is a warm-up sketch I did one morning of my cousin's dog. And this is totally a study of yearbook shapes. You know, you can zoom way out and you still see a dog, and you can still tell what breed it is too. I saved it because I thought this was successful, not as like a finished painting, but as a reminder to me that getting your shape right will solve, and your value also. Shape and value, they go hand in hand, remember. That will solve every problem. You also look like, if you notice, I didn't even paint the eye on the left side of the head. I didn't even paint it. You don't need it. As long as you get your shapes right, an eye can be considered detail. Like when you look at those yearbook photos that I just had on screen here, you look at these yearbook photos, you can't see their eyes. You can't see their nostrils or their, you can't see their teeth. You just see these vague, like ghosts, not ghosts, I don't know, vague forms, really. But those forms all have a shape to them and a value. And that's what's important, getting that right. That's what makes your painting, not just your portrait painting, but that's what makes any painting look like what you want it to look like, is the careful, you know, comparison of all those shapes. And that's why painting is hard. Albert says he has to leave. Bye, Albert. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. And I'll hope to do more, you know, behind the scenes stuff for the Patreon channel as we go. And by the way, while I'm talking about Patreon, actually, you know what? I'll save that thought for the end. I'll save it for the end. All right. Let me go back to the chat because I know I've probably missed a bunch of stuff. Rash says, recently I've heard some artists saying that we will never feel like we're good enough to share our art in social media or participate in art conventions. So, like, what do you think? Well, I think that I don't think the first part is true, because I feel like I don't have a problem sharing my stuff, and I've been sharing my stuff since I think I started my first blog in 2005. I knew, like, I don't, you know, when I post a painting on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or YouTube, I don't think it's the best painting in the world. Like, I just think it's a painting that works. So I've kind of tempered my classification, I guess, of whether a painting is like good enough. Just don't evaluate it. I talked about this before, but don't put your work up against like Craig Mullins or somebody. Like, don't do that, because you're two different people. Instead, just look at your painting and ask yourself, like, do you think it works? And when I say works, it's that idea that I keep getting back to. Does it communicate your message? I talked about that in episode 2 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting. What's the message? Like this one. This painting is about these two characters on a like whimsical bridge, like with whimsical light, and they're hanging out. They're reading a book. So two characters. So that's what's important to me. Two characters, whimsical environment, reading a book. So those three things. Are those three things in this painting? Are they clear? I think yes. I think they're clear. They're not clear here, not on my first stage, but I had to finish the painting. That's where a finished painting. That's what a finished painting is clarifying all your message. So by the time I got to my finished painting, do those three things work? Yes. That means I am more than ready to post it on social media. Now, the reason why those three things work is because they have fundamentals behind them. There's light and shadow that's separated with values. All, you know, halftones. My halftones are correct. These fundamental things, right? There is, you know, my ambient occlusion is working correctly, which I only bring that up because it's my latest video. My ambient light is working correctly. Now, could I go in here and change these brushstrokes? Of course I could. Like, of course I can simplify certain things. I could change these brushstrokes forever because they're so indeterminate, right? Like at a certain point in time, you have to just call your painting finished. And actually, I'm working on a new video workshop right now, Digital Painting 3, which is exactly about this, how to determine this stuff, like the questions you ask yourself to determine this stuff. I'm giving you guys kind of a behind the scenes on that right now. I'll be talking about a lot of these in Digital Painting 3, but overall, I don't care about those brush strokes as long as they hold their place in the painting, and as long as they don't distract from the message, which is these characters reading a book on this beautiful bridge. Then you can just leave your brush strokes messy like this if you want, or you can tighten them up if you want, whatever your style is. That doesn't matter. But is your message clear? And if it's clear, if you think your message is clear, then your painting works. And if your painting works, you can post it. You should feel like you're good enough to post it. Now, again, this gets me back to my rant on the fundamentals. The biggest battle that everyone here, including me, has is, you know, getting to a point with your fundamentals where your paintings do work to their best, to their optimal ability. I've already showed you. Sorry. Do I still have it open? The pizza one, the pizza monster one. Well, I think I closed it, but I already showed you that one and how I think the message is muddled there. It doesn't work. Just like when I showed you my scripted sentence for my YouTube video, how I don't think it worked. You know, that's your job to be like honest with yourself and ask yourself, like, is it working or not? And if it's not, I mean, more often than not, the paintings I'm doing are not working yet. My painting only works at the end when I've figured out all those questions. Oh, Rash says, I meant sometimes that I think I should not post more and learn. And after the years when I become more professional, at least better. I don't think so, Rash. I think you should post your art as you go and don't be worried about it. Now, the only thing where that can get you into trouble is with portfolio. I think you have to be clear, especially these days where everyone goes on Instagram. You know, you have to find some way of like separating your portfolio from your blog. And that's becoming harder to do these days because Instagram is like ubiquitous now and everyone goes on Instagram. And, you know, sometimes people might even scout artists from Instagram. And if you're posting like random sketches, that may not be the best look. So that's a question that's hard to answer. You know, back when I was blogging in like 2005, blogs were informal. It was like this unstated thing. Your blog was informal, like your sketchbook, and your website was formal. And those boundaries are blurred now. So I understand your question, Rash, and I'm not sure I have a clear answer for you. But I think that I don't think you should post everything to the world. But I do think that if your sketches are working, use that as a barometer. If it works, post it. Or if it's a sketch that you think like is a work in progress, you know, maybe just indicate like, this is a work in progress, folks. Let me know what you think. How can I improve this? Like, let it be known that it's not like a finished piece. Cause I think some people might mistake that. I also do think that like having a formal website, like, you know, I have marcobucci.com. I think that's important still because people will still find their way to your website. You know, I can track where my views come from on YouTube or like click-throughs to my store. And I still get a lot of traffic going through my website. So I think that's important to have. And your website should be where you focus your professional, like your best work on. If you're not a professional right now, that's okay. Obviously, we all start as non-professionals, but make your website as just your best work. If you only have 5 paintings that you think are your best, then only put 5 paintings on your website, or maybe wait till you have 10 paintings, you know? Whereas with like, you know, Instagram and stuff, I think you can still post sketches and things there. As long as, you know, I just be clear on making sure people know like, this is my sketchbook, folks, not my portfolio. I don't know if that's a clear answer. And I apologize. It's hard to navigate social media these days because these sites, like I said, they're ubiquitous. Like everyone goes on them, whereas back in the day, it wasn't like that. Dennis says, is all your teaching now done online, CGMA, YouTube, Patreon, as opposed to live classes? Do you work entirely from home? Do you find it better, worse, different? Yeah, so yes, Dennis, all my teaching is online now. Yep, you nailed it. CGMA, YouTube, and Patreon. Those are my 3 outlets. And I also work entirely. My freelance professional art is all done entirely from home. And I find it better for me. It fits my personality more. But I don't think it's for everyone. Like I just happen to enjoy being in a quiet room for 8 hours a day. Like my wife has a real job where she goes to work at an office every day. So, you know, let's say she has like a 9 to 5 day. And during that 9 to 5 day, I'm home alone. Well, my cat, I have my cat for company. And for me, that works. I really enjoy that. I can, if my wife, when my wife goes on business and I have like 24 hours alone, I stay up till 3 a.m. and I work from like 9 a.m. till like 3 in the morning. And the time just goes by. Like it just works for me. But I don't think it works for everyone. And certain people definitely don't like that. And, but I also do credit my days in animation studios because I learned how to work like with others, which is very important when it comes to art stuff, because you're going to always be working for art directors and you're always going to have to satisfy their revisions. And, you know, revisions are the worst. That's the worst part of the job, is when you do the first pass of the painting. That's fun. But then when the art director comes back and says, oh, hey, can the monster be blue instead of green? And by the way, can you like reframe it? Sorry, I'm trying to bring up the painting. I've lost the original. You know, like, you know, you look at this one. You know, hey, can you reframe it so like the monster is the one outside and the kid is the one inside? Those are like, that's when you're like, ugh, you really don't want to do that. But learning to work with people is also a skill, and I got most of that from working in a studio, where like my art director was physically there looking over my shoulder being like, you should change that and that, and getting reviews like every day. That really helped me. It helps you develop like a thick skin, because no matter, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to get revisions. I think on that Disney job I did, the most recent one, yeah, definitely not a single page went through without a revision. And I think in my career as of late, only once has a job ever been approved on the first try. And when it was, I almost like I was in disbelief. I'm like, no, they're going to come back with something. It'll just take them a few days. But no, that job, one job actually went through without any any hiccups. But that's the rarity. Okay. Rash says, oh yeah, you're focused on learning, but you don't want to waste an opportunity. Yeah. Yeah, Rash, just managing your own social media I don't really have any clear answers like, you know, do this, don't do that. Unfortunately I don't, but I guess just try and even quick sketches, like try and post things that you think are working, or like, you know, maybe you want advice as to like what doesn't work. Because I will say that getting people's feedback, even online, is really good, because you can see what they're reacting to. You know, if your painting is working, chances are you'll get responses from people that are like, you know, wow, I love the color, or like, you know, just you will be able to tell from their reactions. Also in real life, like when you show people your art, I talked about this in somewhere. I think it was in a video. I can't remember where I talked about this. It's online somewhere. But when I go outside plein air painting, like sketching outdoors, one of the things I do, and it's not for vanity, but it's for my own learning, is I look at other people looking at my painting. Because like when you're painting watercolors outside, I have an easel. I have an easel set up, or even in my sketchbook, it's obvious that I'm painting. And like people whenever people see an artist painting on site, they flock. They really want to see what you're working on. It's like one of those funny things that no matter where you are in the world, everyone wants to watch a painter paint. I don't know what it is. You know, if someone was writing on the street, no one would care about that. But for some reason, people care about painters. But anyway, one of the things I do is I look at people looking at my work, and I kind of do it surreptitiously. I do it, you know, like I don't make it known, but I look at their reaction, and, you know, you'll get little hints from people. If your painting is working and like popping off the page, you will be able to see it in their expression. They're see a twitch in their eye or something. It's hard to describe. It's all like these little subtle tells of like body language. Or some people will just outright say like, wow, that's great, or something like that. But if the painting doesn't work, if the painting is not working, people will look at it, and like in the same moment, they will just look away and walk away. And, you know, you'll get little hints from people. If your painting is working and like popping off the page, you will be able to see it in their expression. They're see a twitch in their eye or something. It's hard to describe. It's all like these little subtle tells of like body language. Or some people will just outright say like, wow, that's great, or something like that. But if the painting doesn't work, if the painting is not working, people will look at it, and like in the same moment, they will just look away and walk away. and then you're like, ooh, like my painting's not working. It's amazing, like how people like can't hide their reaction. So I use that a lot, and you can get feedback like that online as well. It's not quite as visceral, but watching how people react to your work online is useful. You know, I do that with my YouTube videos. I read all the like 99% of the comments, which sometimes sucks because every now and then you get people who are like just hate you for some reason, and which is never fun to read that. But every now and then someone will actually have a valid critique, and I will always take it into consideration. Sometimes people will criticize a video that I've made, and I'll be like, no, I don't agree with that, and I'll ignore it. But sometimes, you know, some people will make a criticism. Like, for example, one thing I was noticing, just this very minor, I was noticing a few people, because I was putting out those 10 minutes to better paintings videos, which I love. Those are my favorite videos to do. I think that's my best work in terms of teaching. But I was noticing like some people weren't appreciating the format. Like most people were, like 90%, 99% of people were, and which is awesome. That's why I'm going to continue to do them. But some people were like, I prefer the lectures where it's just like kind of just straight ahead, no jokes, just like lecturing. So I listened to that and I did my ambient occlusion video. That was one of the things that motivated me to do my ambient occlusion video, not as a 10 minutes to better painting episode, but as a just straightforward painting lecture where I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just trying to teach. It's like just, you know, bare bones teaching. And, you know, so I always look for that kind of feedback, you know, both positive and negative. When people say they love 10 minutes to better painting, I read those comments and I use that as fuel to do the next one. Okay. We are on our last few minutes here, folks, and I'm just scrolling through the chat on my screen just to make sure I haven't missed any critical things. Just want to thank everyone again for coming. This has been a lot of fun. And thanks if you're watching this after the fact. Thanks for checking this out. I hope this is worth your time. I'm just reading the chat, guys, and I'm just looking for things I might have missed. I don't think I think I've actually been okay. Oh, Sam posted something. When I switch brushes, am I making a conscious decision for the stroke for what stroke it's going to make, or do you let it surprise you and you work with it? Didon, can you copy and paste what you asked? Because I scrolled through and I couldn't find it, and I'm going to answer Sam's question, then I'll answer yours, if you don't mind. Thank you. Julia, no problem, Julia. It's my pleasure. I love these live chats. I get to do these live chats every week in my CGMA class. They're only an hour long, but I always enjoy them. So I knew that this would be fun. So Sam, you probably noticed in my brush box. By the way, everyone should get brush box. It's only like $7 and it's amazing. You notice I have my favorites folder, right? And it's I use these brushes every day, and it's even weighted. Like the brushes at the top are the ones I use the most, and the brushes at the bottom are the ones I use the least. Although except for these two round brushes, I use these a lot. I know these brushes so well that I know the stroke they're going to make. So I actually use them. Oh, thanks, Didon. I will get to those in a second. Sam, I actually use these brushes. The first part of your question, I make a conscious decision because I know what they're going to do for me. I do that with traditional paint too. You know, if I like spatter paint on the canvas, it's because I want something unpredictable. And if I want something unpredictable here, I'll go down to like, you know, a spatter brush. But most of the time when I paint, I'm looking for some degree of predictability, but in a way that's fun. So like you know, this brush here that makes these weird squarish strokes, I'll use that to like indicate, you know, to start me off on a texture, maybe like I just happen to know it's good for maybe an initial idea lay-in for some textures. So I'll start there. So I know what that brush is going to give me. Then maybe I'll switch to like a more traditional round brush, and I'll start using it for the form, because this is a very, like I said, predictable brush. Makes very easy to understand shapes. Sorry, easy to control shapes, I should say. So I'll use it to make shapes that have to be clear. And same with my favorite brush of all time, which is just this chalky brush. I use this brush, you know, for hours a day, because it's just so easy to make a shape with it. But it still has these kind of like textured edges. So yeah, my brushes are all very intentional. When I switch brushes, like I said, every now and then, my decision is to have something random. So I'll go to, like, I have these, I call them random brushes. So like maybe this brush here, if I want something random, I'll go to it. But this brush is not very good for painting, though, because it doesn't make, I can't make readable shapes with it. It's a random brush. So I'll use it sparingly, but you know, there definitely is a time and place for that. Like, it's probably also good for texture, right? So I'll use that as like a lay-in. But yeah, I'm always very specific with the kind of stroke I want. And that's all, like, again, that's the unteachable part. It's just like an internal thing, a little voice in my head that says, switch to that brush, switch to that brush. It's something I've been developing for a long time, just like you guys are, I'm sure, in your own work. Didon says, how has teaching helped me in my artistic growth? Sometimes I ask, I am doing things. Oh, okay. Sometimes you ask if you're doing things right or if you're full of crap. It's helped me in the way, mostly in the way that I've said earlier, Didon, in that it helps me be a clear communicator. The more I teach, the more I have practice in communicating to people. And teaching is so good because the student is giving you assignments. And you know this, you were a student of mine at CGMA. I do a lecture and then you give me an assignment based on my lecture. So I have direct feedback as to whether or not you're able to internalize the lesson. And most of the time, if the student is not able to internalize the lesson, that's probably my fault as the teacher. Because when it comes to fundamentals, a good teacher should be able to deliver a lecture that any student can internalize and deliver on. I'm not saying their work should be sergeant quality, but if I teach a lesson on clear shapes, the student should at least be able to show me that there's an effort made toward clear shapes. If that's not the case, I reevaluate my lesson. And I've been doing that like iteratively over 10 years of teaching. So that, I guess, discipline I apply to my art, like in the ways that I've already said earlier, where I'll determine what my message is, just like in episode 2 of 10 Minutes to Better Painting. What's the message? And then I'll put my focal point there. And I'll bolster that focal point with contrast and directional stuff and all these things that you can use to make your picture work. So teaching helps me like audit myself, I guess. And then Didon says, talking about starting fairly late to get into the industry, and with how fast the current industry is, should one start as a generalist or specialist? Ooh, I don't know, Didon. I like I said, I'm a little out of touch with the industry. I am a specialist, and I've always been a specialist. I've always been a painter. I can character design, like I can do character design, but a big studio would never hire me for that because my portfolio is not strong enough in character design. But like a children's book publisher would hire me to do characters because it's part of a larger illustration. You know, like in this painting, I had to design the characters, but I don't design characters for movies. I design characters for like the illustration that they live in. So I've always been like a background painter or an illustrator. Like those two things are very similar for me. Because background paintings are illustrations. And if you just add some characters in them, you can do that. I often actually approach my paintings in the reverse way that most people do. I often resolve my backgrounds first and then add characters. It's very rare that I start with a character and then add the background, because then the background just kind of always feels like pasted in or something when I do that. So I'm a specialist, but I do know from like talking to some of my friends who are like working on cell phone games and stuff, those studios prefer generalists because they want, well, they're smaller studios, and they want to hire people who can jump from 3D layouts to, I don't know, whatever, texturing, or maybe in 2D. They want someone who can jump between, tweaking a character's color model and, I don't know, you name it, designing it for animation. I don't know. I'm just coming up with words here. So depending on the studio, I do think it's valuable to have some kind of generalist stuff. Now, I think I'm a little too far gone for that. Like I said earlier, I am trying to learn more 3D so I can branch myself out a little bit. But I don't think I'll ever try and get hired as a 3D artist. If anything, I just want to keep up with the trends, and more I've noticed that concept art is there's a lot of 3D bases, 3D. They use 3D as a base to start their concept art. And I just didn't want to get left behind there. So I started learning 3D. But so I guess that is a step towards generalist, but I'm still a specialist. But I just chose that path and it's worked out for me. But I do think there's a tremendous case for being a generalist. Anyway, that's a rambly answer, and I don't have a definitive take on that. Anyway, guys, I think. Oh, Julia says brush folders are native in Photoshop now. Oh, awesome. I didn't know that. And I'm glad that Adobe finally got around to doing that. I wonder if Photoshop bought out Brushbox, or if they just like programmed it in themselves. Because I know that Photoshop bought all of Kyle Brush's stuff. You guys have heard of Kyle Brush, right? A lot of my brushes, like all of those halftone brushes I use, those are all Kyle brushes. These textury weird brushes, those are all Kyle brushes. I have his impastos, like this is a Kyle brush. And I know that Adobe bought all of his stuff and they include it. I actually don't know where to get it anymore, but I think you can get it free with Photoshop. Anyway, good to know that they have. So I wonder if they bought Brushbox or if they just did their own. Anyway, guys, I think we are right at the 2-hour limit. Oh, he's working for Adobe. Awesome. That's good to know. He definitely deserves it. Derek Barth, I think is his name. I follow him on Twitter. Anyway, guys, the last thought I want to say about Patreon is, as we exchange messages and live chats and stuff, I just want to remind everyone that if anyone feels the need to move on from my Patreon, there's no hard feelings there. I know that everyone has a different situation, and sometimes you want to support other people, but everyone's got a budget. And I just want to remind everyone that if you ever want to move on from my Patreon, there's no hard feelings. Even though, like, I know it's hard to do that when you feels like you know the person through messages and stuff. So I just want to say that it's okay. I always have a hard time with that too, because I've had to delete my pledges and I was like, oh no, is that person going to think I don't like them? I don't know. Maybe I'm just insecure that way. But it's okay if any of you guys ever feel the need to move on from my Patreon. And on that note, thank you so much for being a patron of mine. It really, really does help with my YouTube lessons. I think I'm producing higher quality stuff because I have your financial backing. It helps me justify the time more. Whereas before, if you can see my YouTube channel from years ago was not quite as in-depth, not nearly as in-depth as it is now. So thank you. And that's really all I can say. Thanks so much. And also thanks for attending the live chat for those here live. And also if you weren't here live and you're watching a replay right now, thank you for checking it out. Hopefully these thoughts on painting and industry development and personal growth resonate and help you. And hey, we'll probably do another reward, once we get to maybe 200 patrons. We'll see how things go. I will determine that at a later date. Anyway, I'll leave it all here. Say thank you once again, and I will see you on the Patreon page. Let's see if I can figure out how to stop this broadcast. Oh, there's a big red button that says stop broadcast. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you once again.